He looked at her stained apron, then turned to his business partner and laughed, calling her a mindless peasant in rapid, sophisticated French. He thought his wealth was a shield, and his language was a code she couldn't break. He was wrong. The billionaire didn't know that the woman pouring his sparkling water wasn't just a struggling waitress. She was the prodigy he had destroyed years ago, and she was listening to every word of his illegal confession. What happens when the invisible help decides to speak up? The result is a karma so cold it freezes the entire room. The dinner rush at l'Orangerie was not merely a service, it was a battlefield, and Selene Caldwell was losing. The restaurant, situated in the heart of Manhattan's financial district, was a cathedral of glass and mahogany, smelling of truffle oil, aged cognac, and old money. It was the kind of place where a single appetizer cost more than Selene's weekly grocery budget. For the patrons, l'Orangerie was a playground. For Selene, it was a prison of clattering porcelain and aching feet. "Table 4 needs water, Caldwell. Move it!" The hiss came from Gustavo, the floor manager. Gustavo was a man who wore suits that were too tight and a cologne that was too strong, acting as the gatekeeper to the elite. He despised Selene. He despised her frayed cuffs, the dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide, and the fact that she took the bus from Queens every evening. "On it, Gustavo," Selene murmured, keeping her head down. She adjusted the heavy tray on her shoulder, feeling the familiar burn in her lower back. She was 27, but she felt 50. 3 years ago, life had been different. 3 years ago, Selene had been a rising star in the world of linguistic anthropology, finishing her master's degree at the Sorbonne in Paris, fluent in 4 languages and engaged to be married. But tragedy rarely knocks politely. It kicks the door in. First, her father's sudden illness wiped out the family savings. Then came the debt, insurmountable medical bills that her father's insurance refused to cover. She had dropped out, moved back to the States, and taken 3 jobs just to keep the heat on in her parents' small apartment. The fiancé had left shortly after the money ran out. Now the girl who used to quote Voltaire was wiping crumbs off tablecloths for minimum wage, plus tips. "Don't look them in the eye unless they speak to you," Gustavo reminded her as she passed the station. "You are furniture, Selene, efficient furniture." "Yes, sir," she whispered. She approached table 4. It was the prime spot, the power table in the center of the room, reserved for the whales. Tonight it was occupied by 2 men who radiated the specific kind of arrogance that only comes with a 10-figure net worth. The man facing her was striking in a predatory way. He wore a navy bespoke suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. His hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp, and his eyes were cold chips of blue ice. This was Presley Hargrave. Even Selene, who avoided the news, knew who he was. Hargrave was the CEO of Apex Dynamics, a tech conglomerate known for hostile takeovers and stripping companies for parts. He was currently on the cover of Forbes as the Shark of Wall Street. Across from him sat a younger, nervous-looking man named Grant, who was clearly trying to impress him. Selene approached silently, the pitcher of ice water in her hand. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice soft and professional. "Still or sparkling?" Presley didn't look up. He was scrolling through his phone, his thumb moving aggressively across the screen. He didn't acknowledge her existence. "Sparkling," Grant answered quickly, looking apologetic. "And a bottle of the 82 Margot." Selene nodded. As she reached over to fill Presley's glass, the heavy crystal pitcher slipped slightly in her sweaty palm. A single, tiny droplet of condensation fell from the bottom of the pitcher and landed on the sleeve of Presley's expensive jacket. It was a microscopic mistake. But in Presley Hargrave's world, imperfections were capital offences. He jerked his arm back as if she had poured acid on him. He finally looked up, his eyes locking onto hers with pure disgust. "Are you incompetent?" Presley snapped, his voice loud enough to turn heads at the nearby tables. "This is Italian silk. Do you have any idea what this costs?" "I am so sorry, sir," Selina stammered, pulling a cloth from her apron. "Let me just—" "Don't touch me," he hissed, recoiling. "Just get away. Send someone who actually has a brain. God, the standards in this city are plummeting." Selina froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the humiliation burning her skin. From the corner of the room, she saw Gustavo glaring at her, drawing a finger across his throat. "One more strike," the gesture said. "I apologize, sir," Selene said again, bowing her head. She backed away, making herself as small as possible. She retreated to the shadows near the kitchen door, shaking. She needed this job. Her father's dialysis treatment was scheduled for Tuesday, and without the tips from tonight, they wouldn't make the payment. She had to swallow her pride. She had to be the furniture. "Go back out there," Gustavo whispered aggressively, grabbing her elbow. "He wants the wine. You open it perfectly. If you mess this up, Caldwell, don't bother coming back tomorrow." Celine took a deep breath, steeling herself. She picked up the bottle of Chateau Margaux, a bottle worth more than her car, and walked back into the lion's den. When Selene returned to the table, the dynamic had shifted. Presley Hargrave was relaxed now, leaning back in his leather chair, a smirk playing on his lips. He was in his element, dominating the conversation. He ignored Selene completely as she began the delicate process of uncorking the vintage wine. She worked with practiced precision, cutting the foil, inserting the worm, ensuring the cork didn't crumble. She was invisible again. Presley took a sip of water and looked at Grant. Then, without warning, he switched languages. "Regarde-la," Presley said in flawless, rapid-fire French. "Elle tremble comme une feuille. C'est pathétique. Look at her. She's shaking like a leaf. It's pathetic." Selena's hand didn't waver on the bottle, but her mind snapped to attention. The French accent was aristocratic, Parisian, cultivated at the best boarding schools in Switzerland. It was the language she had loved, the language she had lived in for 3 years. Grant looked confused. "I'm sorry, Presley. I didn't catch that." Presley chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "Bien sûr que non," he continued in French, keeping his eyes fixed on Selene's face, searching for any reaction. "Je disais juste que le service ici est horrible. Cette femme a l'air d'avoir été ramassée dans une poubelle." "Of course not. I was just saying the service here is horrible. This woman looks like she was dragged out of a garbage bin." Selene felt a cold spike in her chest. He was testing her, or rather, he was so confident in her inferiority that he assumed she was too uneducated to understand him. To him, she was just a clumsy American waitress. She carefully pulled the cork with a soft pop. She placed it on the silver coaster and began to pour a tasting amount for Grant. Her face remained a mark of stone. "She doesn't understand a word," Presley said, switching back to English for a brief second to address Grant, before sliding back into French. "C'est mieux comme ça. Nous pouvons parler affaires sans que les domestiques écoutent." "It's better this way. We can talk business without the servants listening." Grant laughed nervously. "Right. So, about the merger with VTech?" Presley swirled his wine glass, ignoring the wine Selene had just poured. He leaned in closer to Grant, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but clearly audible to Selene, who was standing right beside him, waiting to fill the glasses. "Écoute attentivement," Presley said in French, his tone sharpening. Le rapport de sécurité de VTech est un désastre. Leur batterie explose si elle chauffe trop. Ils ont caché les tests. Listen closely. VTech's safety report is a disaster. Their batteries explode if they overheat. They hid the tests. Selena's internal alarm bells began to ring. VTech? That was the company her uncle worked for. It was a massive manufacturer of electric scooters and laptops. Grant blinked, trying to keep up but failing. Presley. My French is rusty. High school was a long time ago. Presley rolled his eyes and switched to English, but only for the filler words, keeping the incriminating details in French, treating it like a game. The point is, Grant, we are going to buy them. But not yet. He took a sip of water and looked directly at Selene, smiling as if she were a simpleton. Nous allons faire fuiter le rapport de sécurité demain matin, Presley said cheerfully in French. L'action va s'effondrer. Elle vaudra moins $1, et c'est là que nous achèterons tout. We are going to leak the safety report tomorrow morning. The stock will crash. It will be worth less than $1. And that is when we buy everything. Selene poured the wine into Presley's glass. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought they could hear it. This wasn't just arrogance. This was market manipulation. It was fraud. He was planning to destroy a company's value, bankrupting thousands of employees and shareholders just to buy it cheap. Grant looked uneasy. Presley, if there's a safety issue, shouldn't we report it to the authorities? If we short the stock and then buy it, isn't that insider trading or manipulation? Presley waved his hand dismissively. Tout est trop sentimental, he scoffed in French. Personne ne saura que c'est nous qui avons fait fuiter l'info. Nous serons les sauveurs qui rachètent l'entreprise en faillite. Nous gagnerons 200 millions en une semaine. You are too sentimental. No one will know we leaked the info. We will be the saviors who buy the bankrupt company. We will make 200 million in a week. He looked up at Selene, his eyes narrowing. He seemed to derive pleasure from insulting her to her face, secure in the knowledge that she was deaf to his meaning. Et avec cet argent, he sneered, gesturing at Selene with his wine glass. Je pourrais peut-être acheter ce restaurant et virer cette incompétente. Regarde ses chaussures. Elles sont dégoûtantes. And with that money, maybe I'll buy this restaurant and fire this incompetent woman. Look at her shoes. They are disgusting. Selene finished pouring the wine. She set the bottle down on the table with a little more force than necessary. The thud echoed slightly. She had taken the abuse about her skills. She had taken the insult about the water. But mocking her poverty, planning to ruin thousands of lives, including potentially her uncle's, for sport. Something inside Selene Caldwell snapped. The fatigue vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. The furniture was about to come alive. She stepped back, clasping her hands behind her back. She looked Grant in the eye, then turned her gaze slowly, deliberately, to Presley Hargrave. Presley frowned. He didn't like the way she was looking at him. It wasn't the look of a servant anymore. It was the look of an equal. Is there a problem? Presley asked in English, his voice dripping with condescension. Or did you forget how to leave the table? Selena took a breath. The air in the restaurant seemed to stand still. Monsieur Hargrave, Selene began, her voice dropping an octave, resonating with a perfect, crisp Parisian accent that rivaled his own. Je vous assure que mes chaussures sont le cadet de vos soucis ce soir. Mr. Hargrave, I assure you that my shoes are the least of your worries tonight. Presley froze. His hand, halfway to his glass, stopped in mid-air. His eyes went wide, the blue ice cracking for the first time. Grant dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china, but no one looked at him. Selena didn't stop. She locked eyes with the billionaire, her expression calm and terrifyingly composed. Et pour votre information, she continued, the French rolling off her tongue like poetry. Manipuler le cours de l'action de Vitek en faisant fuiter des données confidentielles pour commettre un délit d'initié est passible de 10 ans de prison fédérale, surtout quand il y a des témoins. And for your information, manipulating Vitek's stock price by leaking confidential data to commit insider trading is punishable by 10 years in federal prison, especially when there are witnesses. The silence that followed was deafening. The bustle of the restaurant seemed to fade away, leaving only the three of them in a bubble of tension. Presley's face turned a shade of pale that matched the tablecloth. You, Presley whispered, his voice failing him. Me? Celine replied in English, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. The peasant with the disgusting shoes. For 10 agonizing seconds, the only sound at table 4 was the soft hum of the restaurant's air conditioning and the frantic rhythm of Grant's breathing. Presley Hargrave stared at Celine. The amusement was gone, wiped clean from his face as if by a sudden storm. In its place was a look of cold calculation. He was a predator who had suddenly realized the rabbit he was chasing had fangs. "Who are you?" Presley asked, his voice low and dangerous. He didn't switch back to French. The game of secrets was over. "I'm the waitress," Celine replied, her voice steady despite the tremors in her legs. "The one you said belongs in a garbage bin." Grant, sweating profusely now, leaned across the table. "Presley, we have to go. If she repeats this—" "Shut up, Grant," Presley snapped, never taking his eyes off Celine. He stood up slowly, smoothing the front of his expensive suit. He towered over her, using his height as a weapon. It was a tactic that usually worked in boardrooms, shrinking his opponents into submission. But Selena didn't flinch. She had watched her father wither away in a hospital bed, while insurance bureaucrats denied their claims. She had faced eviction notices and hunger. A rich man in a suit didn't scare her anymore. Life had already done its worst. "You speak French," Presley said, stating it like an accusation. "Fluent. Sorbonne accent. What is a girl with that kind of education doing wiping tables?" "Life happens," Celine said tightly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to work before I'm fired for fraternizing with the customers." She turned to leave, but Presley reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was hard, painful. "You aren't going anywhere," he hissed. "Let go of me," Selene said, her voice rising. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Hargrave?" Gustavo, the manager, materialized out of the gloom like a bad omen. He looked from Presley's angry face to Selene's trapped wrist, and his eyes widened in horror. He immediately assumed the worst, that Selene had spilled something, insulted the guest, or caused a scene. "I am so sorry, Mr. Hargrave," Gustavo cried, wringing his hands. "Has this employee caused you distress? I will remove her immediately. Selene, get to the office. You are done. You hear me? Done!" "No," Presley said sharply, cutting Gustavo off. He didn't let go of Selene's wrist. Gustavo blinked, confused. "Sir?" "She isn't done," Presley said, forcing a tight, fake smile. "In fact, we were just having a misunderstanding, a cultural miscommunication. Selena here was just apologizing." Celine looked at Presley, realizing his game. He couldn't let her leave. If she walked out that door now, fired and angry, she became a loose cannon. She became a liability. He needed her close. He needed to contain the damage. "Leave us, Gustavo," Presley commanded. "Bring us another bottle of the Margot, and make sure we aren't disturbed. I want to have a private word with your staff member to ensure adequate compensation for her trouble." Gustavo looked baffled. He looked at Selene, who was staring daggers at the billionaire, and then back at the VIP customer. "As you wish, Mr. Hargrave. I will bring the wine myself." Gustavo scurried away, casting a suspicious glance over his shoulder. Once they were alone again, Presley released her wrist. He sat back down and gestured to the empty chair between him and Grant. "Sit," Presley ordered. "I'm on the clock," Selene said. "I just bought your clock," Presley countered. "Sit down." Selene hesitated. She knew she should walk away. She should go straight to the police. But who would believe her? It was her word against the word of a man who owned senators. She needed more than just a memory of a conversation. She needed leverage. She pulled out the chair and sat, keeping a safe distance from the table. Presley studied her, his eyes narrowing. He pulled a silver money clip from his jacket pocket. It was thick with bills, crisp, $100 notes. He didn't count them. He simply slid the entire stack across the white tablecloth toward her. It had to be at least $5,000, more money than she had seen in one place in 3 years. "Let's be adults," Presley said smoothly. "You heard some things. Things that, out of context, might sound questionable." "Insider trading isn't questionable, Mr. Hargrave," Selene said, looking at the money with disdain. "It's illegal. VTech employs 4,000 people. Bankrupting them to strip their assets isn't business, it's theft." Presley laughed, a dry, humorless bark. "You are an idealist. I knew it. The Sorbonne breeds them. Listen to me, Selene. Those 4,000 people, they are going to lose their jobs eventually anyway. VTech is inefficient. I'm just accelerating the process. It's natural selection." He tapped the stack of money. "This is $5,000, he said. "Take it. Walk away. Forget you ever heard the name VTech. It pays your rent, buys you some new shoes, maybe gets you out of this dump." Grant chimed in, his voice shaky. "It's a lot of money. You should take it." Selene looked at the cash. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. It would pay for her father's next 3 treatments. It would fix the leaking roof. It would buy groceries for months. But then she thought about her uncle. She thought about the emails he sent, talking about how proud he was of the new safety protocols at VTech, how hard the engineers were working. She thought about the families who would wake up next week to find their pensions gone because Presley Hargrave wanted a new yacht. She looked up at Presley, her eyes burning. "Is that what you think my integrity costs?" she asked quietly. $5,000? Presley sighed, looking bored. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a checkbook. He uncapped a gold fountain pen. "Fine. Everyone has a number. What's yours? 10? 20? I can write a check for $50,000 right now. That's 2 years of salary for you, isn't it?" He started writing. The scratch of the pen against the paper was the only sound. $50,000, Presley murmured. "Clear. Tax-free if you're smart about it. All you have to do is nod, take the check, and sign a non-disclosure agreement I'll have my lawyer draft in the morning." He tore the check out and placed it on top of the cash. "Choice is yours, mademoiselle," he mocked softly. "Be a hero and stay poor, or be smart and survive." Selena looked at the check. The zeros seemed to dance in front of her eyes. 50,000. It could change everything. But she also knew something else about men like Presley Hargrave. If she took the money, she was complicit. And once she was complicit, he owned her. He would have proof she took a bribe. He could destroy her later whenever he felt like it. She stood up slowly. "I need to check on my other tables," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Presley smiled, misinterpreting her hesitation as submission. He thought she was breaking. He thought she was going to the back to hyperventilate before coming back to take the cash. "Take your time," Presley said, sipping his water. "The offer expires when I finish this glass." "The state of New York," she said, a cold smile touching her lips. "Only one party needs to consent to a recording." And I consented. Presley's face went white. He looked at her pocket. He realized what she had done. "Give me the phone," he snarled, lunging out of his chair. Celine took a quick step back. "Grant," she shouted, turning to the terrified assistant. "If he touches me, it's assault, and there are 50 witnesses in this room." Presley froze. He looked around. People at nearby tables were watching. The ambient noise had dropped. A couple at table 5 was staring openly. "You wouldn't dare," Presley whispered, his voice shaking with rage. "I will crush you. I will bury you in legal fees. You will never work again." "Maybe," Celine said. "But by tomorrow morning, this recording will be in the inbox of the SEC, the FBI, and the New York Times. You won't be buying VTech, Presley. You'll be looking for a criminal defense attorney." She turned to walk away. But this time, the exit wasn't clear. Gustavo was rushing toward them, flanked by 2 large security guards. He had seen the commotion, seen Presley lunge. "Grab her!" Presley shouted, pointing at Celine. "She stole from me. She has my property." Gustavo didn't ask questions. He signaled the guards. "Don't let her leave." Celine's heart hammered against her ribs. She had the evidence, but she was trapped. The front door was blocked by the host stand. The kitchen exit was blocked by Gustavo, and Presley Hargrave was coming for her. The dining room of l'Orangerie descended into madness. "Stop her!" Presley Hargrave roared, his voice cracking with desperation. "She has stolen corporate property, security." Gustavo, the manager, was a man of little courage, but great obedience to wealth. He lunged for Celine, his arms wide. Celine, fueled by a surge of adrenaline that felt like electric fire in her veins, didn't think. She reacted. She dropped her center of gravity and spun to the left, causing Gustavo to crash clumsily into a dessert cart. A tower of crème brûlées shattered against the floor, sending shards of porcelain and custard flying. "Get out of the way!" Selene screamed at a busboy who stood frozen in her path. 2 uniformed security guards, thick-necked men hired to intimidate rather than protect, were barreling toward her from the entrance. The front door was cut off. The host stand was a choke point. She had only one option, the belly of the beast. Celine sprinted toward the kitchen swing doors. She hit them with her shoulder, bursting into the bright, steamy chaos of the back of the house. "Behind! Hot behind!" a sous chef screamed, nearly dropping a pan of searing scallops as Celine flew past him. "Watch it!" snapped the head chef, a tempestuous man named Marco. "What is this? Who is running in my kitchen?" "Call the police," Celine shouted over her shoulder, not slowing down. "Presley Hargrave is attacking me." But before the kitchen staff could process her words, the double doors swung open again with a violent bang. The 2 security guards burst in, knocking over a waiter carrying a tray of soups. "Grab the girl," one of the guards bellowed. "Don't let her leave the building." Celine scrambled past the prep station, her sneakers squeaking on the greasy red tile. She knew this kitchen better than they did. She knew about the uneven floor near the dish pit. She knew about the narrow gap between the walk-in freezers. She grabbed a metal rack on wheels, stacked high with clean sheet pans, and shoved it backward with all her strength. It careened into the path of the lead guard, catching him in the shin. He grunted in pain and stumbled, buying her 3 precious seconds. "There, by the loading dock," the second guard shouted. Celine reached the heavy steel door of the rear exit. She slammed the push bar. It didn't budge, locked. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her throat. Gustavo always locked the back door after the 6 p.m. delivery to prevent staff from sneaking out for smoke breaks. She was trapped. She turned around. The guards were 10 feet away, navigating through the angry chefs who were now shouting at the intrusion. Presley Hargrave stood in the kitchen doorway, his suit pristine amidst the culinary warfare, his face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "You have nowhere to go, Celine," Presley sneered, his voice cutting through the noise of clattering pans. "Give me the phone. I'll make this go away. Don't ruin your life over a mistake." Selena looked at the phone in her hand. It was her lifeline. If she gave it up, she was nothing. Her eyes darted to the right. The dishwashing station. The conveyor belt that moved dirty plates through the industrial sanitizer machine was running. Next to it was the garbage chute, a grim metal slide that dumped trash directly into the large dumpster in the alley below. It was disgusting. It was dangerous. It was her only exit. "Go to hell," Selene said. She scrambled up onto the stainless steel counter of the dish pit. "She's going for the chute! Get her!" Presley screamed. The guard lunged, his hand catching the fabric of her apron. Selena felt herself being jerked back. She didn't hesitate. She frantically untied the knot at her waist. The apron, and the badge that labeled her as staff, came loose in the guard's hand. Selene slid backward into the open mouth of the garbage chute. She fell 5 feet, sliding down slippery metal that smelled of rotting vegetables and stale wine. She landed hard on a pile of black trash bags inside the open dumpster in the alleyway. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She gasped, rolling off the bags and tumbling onto the wet asphalt of the alley. It was raining, a cold, biting New York drizzle. Above her, the heavy metal door of the loading dock banged open. The guards had found the keys. "I see her," a voice echoed from above. "She's in the alley." Selena scrambled to her feet. Her uniform was stained, her hair was plastered to her face, and her elbow was bleeding. But she had the phone. She clutched it so tight her knuckles were white. She ran. She didn't run toward the main avenue, where Presley's limousine and driver were undoubtedly waiting. She ran deeper into the labyrinth of service alleys that snaked behind the skyscrapers of the financial district. She could hear heavy footsteps splashing in the puddles behind her. They were chasing her. A billionaire CEO was hunting a waitress through the streets of Manhattan like it was a sport. Celine turned a sharp corner, knocking over a stack of cardboard boxes. She needed to get to a public place, a subway station, a police precinct, anywhere with cameras and people. But as she emerged onto a side street, she saw a black SUV screech to a halt at the intersection ahead. The window rolled down. It was Grant, looking terrified, scanning the street. "She's heading north on Cedar," Grant yelled into a radio. They were boxing her in. They had cars. They had radios. She was on foot, shivering and alone. Selene ducked back into the shadows of a scaffolding tunnel. She needed to disappear. She needed help. But who? She couldn't go home. Her employment file had her address. They would be there before she was. She couldn't go to the police yet. Presley likely had connections at the local precinct, and if they confiscated her phone for evidence, the recording might mysteriously vanish. She needed someone powerful, someone outside of Presley's circle. Then she remembered. Table 7. The rain had soaked through Selene's thin white shirt, chilling her to the bone, but her mind was feverishly hot. She was running on instinct and adrenaline, her sneakers slapping against the wet pavement of the Upper East Side. She couldn't go home. Presley's files had her address. She couldn't go to the police precinct. A man with Hargrave's reach would have the evidence buried before she filled out a statement. She needed a sanctuary that existed outside his payroll. Table 7. The memory flashed in her mind. Arthur Kavanaugh, the elderly gentleman who ordered Earl Grey and treated her like a granddaughter. He had slipped her a card once, weeks ago. "If you ever find yourself in a corner you can't think your way out of, come see me." She didn't have the card. but she remembered the address because he had joked about it. The brownstone with the blue door on 65th. Selena turned the corner, her chest heaving, her legs burning with lactic acid. She scanned the row of multi-million-dollar townhouses until she saw it. The blue door. She scrambled up the stone steps and pounded on the heavy brass knocker. She rang the doorbell repeatedly, glancing over her shoulder. A black SUV prowled at the end of the block, its headlights sweeping the rain-slicked street like searchlights. "Please, Arthur," she whispered, shivering violently. "Please be home." The door cracked open. It wasn't Arthur. A severe-looking housekeeper in a black dress peered out, eyeing Selene's drenched uniform and the blood on her elbow with profound suspicion. "We are not buying anything," the woman said, starting to close the door. "No, wait!" Selene jammed her foot in the gap. "I need to see Mr. Kavanaugh. Tell him it's Selene from l'Orangerie. It's life or death." The housekeeper hesitated. Down the street, the SUV stopped. The doors opened, and two men in suits stepped out, scanning the house numbers. "Please," Selena begged, tears mixing with the rain. "They're going to hurt me." "Martha?" A gravelly voice drifted from the hallway. "Who is it at this hour?" Arthur Kavanaugh appeared in the foyer, leaning on a cane. He wore a velvet smoking jacket, looking frail and ancient. He squinted through his spectacles and his eyes widened. "Selena? My dear girl." "Arthur, please," Selene whispered. "Presley Hargrave is chasing me." Arthur's demeanor shifted instantly. The frailty evaporated, replaced by a steely alertness. He looked past her, saw the men approaching the steps, and understood. "Let her in, Martha," Arthur commanded, his voice booming. "Now." Martha stepped back. Selena stumbled inside, collapsing onto the foyer rug. Arthur slammed the heavy door and threw the deadbolt. "Lock the service entrance," he ordered. "Draw the blinds in the front parlor." He turned to Selene, extending a hand. "Come." The library. He led her into a room that smelled of old leather and tobacco, seating her near the fire. He poured a glass of amber liquid and pressed it into her shaking hands. "Presley Hargrave," Arthur mused, watching her drink. "The Shark of Wall Street. Why is he hunting a waitress through my neighborhood?" "I served his table," Selene rasped, the warmth of the brandy hitting her stomach. "He didn't know I spoke French. He admitted to everything, Arthur. He's forging a safety report to crash VTech stock tomorrow so he can buy the company. He confessed to fraud and bribery." Arthur's eyebrows shot up. And I recorded it." Selene pulled the cracked, wet phone from her pocket. "I have it all. He offered me $50,000 to delete it. I tore up his check. Then he tried to have his guards take me." Arthur looked at the phone as if it were a weapon. He sat down opposite her, a slow, wolfish smile spreading across his face. "You recorded a confession of market manipulation and wire fraud? Selene, do you know who I was before I retired?" Selene shook her head. "No, just a kind man." "I was the district attorney for the Southern District of New York for 20 years, Arthur said, his eyes gleaming. "And before that, lead counsel for the SEC. I spent my career trying to catch men like Hargrave. They never confess. They are ghosts." He held out his hand. Selene unlocked the phone and passed it to him. Arthur pressed play. Presley's voice filled the quiet library, arrogant and clear. "The report is a fabrication. The batteries are perfectly safe. I trigger the buy order at 10 a.m. When it ended, Arthur sat back, satisfied. Beautiful. It's absolute suicide. He didn't just break the law, he gloated about it. Suddenly, a thunderous banging shook the front door. "Open up!" a muffled voice shouted. "We know she's in there. This is private security." Selena jumped, terrified. "They found me!" Arthur didn't flinch. He picked up an old landline on his desk. "Martha, do not answer that door." He dialed a number from memory. "Commissioner?" Arthur said calmly into the receiver. "It's Arthur Cavanaugh." "Yes, Frank, I'm fine. Listen, I have a situation. Presley Hargrave's private security is attempting to breach my home. They are menacing a federal witness." "Yes, that Hargrave." Arthur listened, then smiled grimly. "Send a tactical unit, Frank. I want them arrested for attempted breaking and entering. Goodbye." He hung up. "The police commissioner is sending the cavalry. Mr. Hargrave is about to have a very bad night." Crash. A brick shattered the front bay window. Glass sprayed across the floor, and the heavy velvet curtains billowed as wind and rain rushed into the parlor. "They aren't waiting," Celine cried. "They are desperate," Arthur said, standing and gripping his cane. "If that recording leaves this house, his life is over." He moved to a bookshelf, pulling a specific volume. A hidden panel clicked open, revealing a heavy steel safe. "Put the phone in here, now!" Selene ran to the safe, placing the device inside. Arthur slammed it shut and spun the dial. "Now," Arthur said, facing the hallway where the sound of heavy boots crunching on glass echoed. "Let's see if they dare touch a former district attorney." The library doors burst open. It wasn't just the guards. Presley Hargrave stepped through the broken frame, water dripping from his hair, his face twisted in manic fury. He had crossed the line. He was no longer a CEO. He was a criminal fighting for survival. "Give me the girl," Presley snarled, "and give me the phone, or we burn this house down with you inside." The library of Arthur Cavanaugh's brownstone was a sanctuary-turned battlefield. Presley Hargrave stood in the center of the room, water dripping from his ruined suit onto the Persian rug. His chest heaved, his eyes wild. The veneer of the sophisticated billionaire had eroded, revealing the desperate thug beneath. Behind him, the two security guards loomed like gargoyles. 5 seconds, Presley spat, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "Open the safe, give me the phone, or my men tear this place apart, and you two with it." Arthur Cavanaugh didn't flinch. He leaned on his cane, radiating the authority of a man who had stared down mob bosses for decades. "Mr. Hargrave, you have already committed assault and breaking and entering. Add armed robbery to that list, and you won't see daylight until you're 70. "I don't care about the law," Presley screamed. "I am the law. I own the judges. Do you think a retired old man can stop me?" He pointed a shaking finger at Celine. You insignificant waitress. You ruined everything because you couldn't just take the money. Why? For honor. Those are fairy tales for poor people." Celine stepped out from behind Arthur. Her heart hammered like a trapped bird, but she was done running. She looked at the man who had treated her like furniture and saw him for what he was, small. "It wasn't for honor, Presley," she said, steady. "It was because you thought I was too stupid to understand. You underestimated me." Presley snarled. "Grab her. Make the old man open the safe." "Stay back!" Arthur shouted, raising his cane. The lead guard laughed, swatting the cane away effortlessly. It clattered across the floor as he shoved Arthur into a bookshelf. "Arthur!" Celine screamed. She grabbed a heavy brass poker from the fireplace, swinging it wildly to keep them back. "Don't touch him!" "Enough games!" Presley roared. He grabbed a heavy bronze bust from the desk and raised it over his head, threatening the safe itself. "Open it or I smash everything in this room!" The guard lunged, wrenching the poker from Selene's hands and pinning her against the wall. "Open the safe, old man!" the guard shouted, "or the girl gets hurt." Arthur looked at Selene, pain in his eyes. He began to reach for the dial. Presley smiled, a cruel, triumphant grin. Force always won. Then the room flooded with blue and red light. Sirens cut through the storm, a symphony of them wailing right outside the broken window. Doors slammed. "Police! Surround the house!" A voice boomed from a megaphone. Presley froze, the bronze bust still hovering over his head, the color drained from his face. "I told you," Arthur said, straightening his jacket. "The NYPD doesn't work for you." The front door didn't open. It exploded inward with a crack boom of a battering ram. "NYPD, get on the ground!" A tactical team swarmed the hallway, weapons drawn, lights cutting through the gloom. "Drop the weapon!" a SWAT officer screamed at Presley. Presley dropped the bust. It landed on his foot with a sickening crunch, but he was too shocked to scream. He raised his hands, shaking violently. The guards released Selene and hit the floor instantly. Selene slid down the wall, gasping for air, watching as officers slammed Presley against the mahogany desk and ratcheted handcuffs onto his wrists. "You're making a mistake," Presley stammered, face pressed against the wood. "I'm Presley Hargrave. That woman stole corporate secrets." Commissioner Frank DeLuca walked in, stepping over broken glass. He looked at the chaos, then at Arthur. "You okay, Arthur?" "Better now, Frank," Arthur replied, retrieving his cane. "I believe you have a reservation for the holding cell." "She has a recording," Presley screamed as they hauled him up. "It's inadmissible. She's a liar." Selene stood up slowly. Arthur nodded to her. He spun the dial and opened the safe. She took out the phone and handed it to the commissioner. "It's all on there," Selene said clearly. "Market manipulation, wire fraud, bribery, and the conspiracy to fabricate safety reports." DeLuca bagged the phone. As officers dragged Presley toward the door, he dug his heels into the rug, turning to look at Selena one last time. His eyes held hatred, but mostly confusion. He still couldn't understand how a waitress had bested him. Selena didn't scream or gloat. She leaned in close, whispering so only he could hear. "La prochaine fois, Monsieur Hargrave, méfiez-vous des domestiques. Nous entendons tout." "Next time, Mr. Hargrave, beware of the servants. We hear everything." Presley's mouth fell open. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The police dragged him out into the rain, where news crews were already capturing his fall from grace. The fall of Presley Hargrave was swift. By morning, VTech trading was suspended. By noon, the SEC charged him with 12 counts of fraud. The board of Apex Dynamics fired him immediately. But the world was captivated by the waitress. During the trial, the transcript became public. The phrase, "She's shaking like a leaf. It's pathetic," became a viral headline. Selene became a symbol of the working class striking back. Arthur Kavanaugh came out of retirement to represent her pro bono, decimating Presley's defense. 6 months later, Presley pleaded guilty. He received 8 years in federal prison and a $40 million fine. Selene never returned to l'Orangerie. Under the SEC whistleblower program, she was entitled to a percentage of the sanctions collected. Her award was $4 million. 1 year later, Paris was painted in autumn gold. Selene sat at a cafe, a textbook open. She was finishing her master's degree at the Sorbonne. Her father was safe back home, his medical bills a memory. "Mademoiselle?" A tired waiter appeared, his apron stained. "Un café crème, s'il vous plaît." Selene smiled. As he turned, he bumped the chair of a businessman at the next table. "Watch it, clumsy idiot," the man snapped, then muttered in English, "Service here is a joke." Selene closed her book. She reached into her purse and handed the waiter a €20 note. "Keep the change," she said softly. "And don't worry about him. Some men think money buys class. It never does." The waiter looked at her, surprised. "Merci, mademoiselle." Selene sipped her coffee, watching the leaves fall. She was no longer furniture. She was the architect of her own life, and she would never let anyone make her feel small again. Presley Hargrave believed his bank account gave him the right to treat people like dirt. He thought an apron made Selene invisible. He learned the hard way that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you overlook. Arrogance is a blindfold, and karma is the wall you eventually hit. Selene didn't just win millions, she won her dignity back, proving that integrity is worth more than any stock portfolio. If you were in Selene's shoes, would you have taken the $50,000 bribe to save your family quickly, or would you have risked it all to expose the truth? It's a hard choice when you're struggling. Let me know your honest answer in the comments below.